Welcome to the AgriMinds podcast. If you're in agriculture and feeling the weight of responsibility, juggling work, family, and everything in between, you are in the right place. I'm your host, Casey Bull, coach, speaker, and founder of AgriMinds. Each week, we'll talk about the real side of leadership, how to think clearly, manage your time, set boundaries, and show up with intention, both at home and in the field. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to the AgriMinds podcast. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you a personal story, one that at first was like, do I really want the world to know this about me? Do I really want to put this on record and have this broadcasted for anybody and everybody to hear about myself? Not necessarily. However, here we are. I just feel like this is a teaching moment. And so I am going to suck it up and let you in on something that happened to me this past week. So my son and I were in the kitchen the other day, and he was working on his 4-H project posters. And if you don't know anything about what I'm talking about, so 4-H is an organization that a lot of kids join, especially rural or country kids join this, and they can learn about all sorts of different topics. Well, my son was working on a poster to showcase his knowledge about some of the projects that he had been working on. And, he's being very meticulous with what he's putting where, what he's gluing where, what things look like. I mean, he wants to do a really good job on this poster. And he gets it done and he goes, "Mom, come look at it." So I go over there and I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, this is really good. And I'm looking at all the different areas and all the different things that he had put into detail. And then I get down towards the bottom and there's this paint smudge. And I was like, "Hudson, you smudged the paint." And he's like, "Oh man," like he's so bummed about it. And I lay into him. I'm like, "We just talked about this. You have to be so careful. You've got to pay attention." And I feel like this has been a recurring conversation between us of just like, you've got to pay attention to these things. You're being kind of sloppy, and I just like kind of made him feel full of shame, to be honest with you. I'm kind of like letting him know like, hey, you got to pay attention. Like, this is a big deal. We don't have time to start this poster over. And as I'm kind of like waving my hand in the air as I'm talking to him, I notice green paint on the side of my palm. Yeah, I smudged the paint. When I tell you my tail went right between my legs at that moment, oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed, shocked. Holy crap. How did I do that? I was being careful. I was paying attention. I smudged the wet paint on my son's poster. Yep. I'm admitting this out loud. I'm telling the whole world it was my fault. I wasn't paying attention. Now, my initial thought was, "Hudson, you shouldn't have told me about it until it was dry," or like, "You should have made sure to let me know the paint was still wet." Like, I could have absolutely turned it on him and yelled at him and reprimanded him and made it his fault. Could have done that. Or I could have said, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry," and take complete ownership of what had just happened. And I did. I chose that path. I said, "I am so sorry." I said, "This is a teaching moment for not just myself, but for both of us right now." I said, "I don't know how that happened. I didn't realize that it was wet. I don't even remember my side of my hand touching the poster," and kind of just like walked him through what I was feeling at that moment, and that I was so sorry for yelling at him and for jumping to conclusions and just really reacting inappropriately in that moment. And that's hard to admit. That's hard to do. And especially when you're like in a place of employment, right? Where the stakes are high. Your team is watching you. Your boss is watching you. Like, I couldn't even imagine doing it in a place like that. But just doing it in front of my son with just him and I home was embarrassing and yeah, all the things. It was all the things. However, it reminded me of something that I had read inside of the book, Extreme Ownership. And I want to read this passage to you. So I'm in the book, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And I don't even know if I'm saying their names right, but I think I'm pretty close. But if you've never read the book, it's a good one. It was challenging for me to get into it because I'm not really like a war person, but the leadership principles are really, really good. Okay, anyway, I want to read to you this passage inside of that book. It says, leaders should never be satisfied. They must always strive to improve, and they must build that mindset into the team. They must face the facts through realistic, brutally honest assessments of themselves and their team's performance. Now, I'm going to skip a couple of sentences here. This starts with the individual and it spreads to each of the team members until this becomes the culture, the new standard. And when I think about those words, it doesn't just apply to our teams at work. It doesn't just apply to our units if we're in the military, right? But to our children, to our community, to our spouses. I mean, this is important. How you show up does impact and influence those around us. Taking that extreme ownership of, yeah, this worked, or no, this didn't work, or here's what I thought was going to happen and it didn't work out. What do we need to do differently next time? And really just checking in with ourselves, evaluating and taking that honest assessment, that brutally honest assessment of ourselves and owning it. Even when it's not pretty, even when you're embarrassed, even when you're like completely shocked and like, I didn't even know that happened, even when it means you have to backtrack in front of somebody that looked up to you, that you're the leader of, that you're an influence of, even just kind of like admitting, I did something wrong or that didn't go the way that I thought it was going to, and taking ownership and not blaming outside external forces or people or events, but just truly saying, here's what I know. Here's what I know to believe that is true. Here's what I thought was going to happen. And I'm taking full ownership of it. Oh my gosh, that is such a hard thing to do. But when I tell you how important it is, I'm like double tapping, bold, highlight, asterisk, all the things. This is so important because in that moment, again, not only did I learn a lot, but my son learned so much about what it means to be honest, to own up to things that you made a mistake around, the communication and the reaction. There was so many learning points in that moment. And again, I don't think it just applies to one area of your life, but to all of them. The way that you show up, both positively and negatively, make an impact. And there's a ripple effect to it. If you're listening to this episode thinking, wow, this is exactly how I've been feeling lately, I want you to know you are not alone. Agriminds is not about adding one more thing to your already full plate. It's about helping you navigate those pressures, the stress, leadership, and responsibilities that you're already carrying with more clarity, support, and intention. Inside Agriminds, you'll find practical tools, coaching, leadership development, and a community full of agriculture professionals who truly understand the realities of this life. If you're ready to stop just surviving your days and start leading them with more intention, the link to learn more is in the show notes. And I remember one time, this was several years ago, and I was talking with my husband about one of the leadership programs that I was in. And I was telling him about some of the stuff that we were talking about. And I remember asking him what he thought about it all. And he was like, it's not really like my thing, but if you like it, if you feel like it's helpful and supportive and, it's helping you do whatever you want to do, I'll support you in it. But Like, that's not really like my kind of thing. And I kind of dropped it, even though I thought to myself, like, that's kind of a bummer. I was really hoping that we could connect over that, or like, I'm putting in this work, I'm choosing to grow. I was really hoping that you would grow with me or join me. And ironically enough, a couple years later, he joined the exact same leadership program. And maybe he doesn't admit it, or maybe he doesn't talk about it as in depth as I do because we're just different. But I know that he learned so much through that experience, and he has grown so much in that experience. And I just like kind of grin to myself because I don't want to, he doesn't want me to like make a big deal about it. But it's just like, even though it took a couple of years, that conversation did make an impact. The way that I showed up, the way that I was being vulnerable, the way that I was sharing some of the things that I was struggling with, the things that I was like painfully growing through with him did make an impact. And maybe I didn't notice it right away. Like, it took a couple of years to see anything from that conversation, but it obviously did stick. It did make an impact. And he decided to go through that leadership program himself. And had I not chosen to share with him the things that I was growing through and the things that I was being challenged with, I mean, my mindset was very different back then. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this part's irrelevant, that part's irrelevant. I'm really in the program for this one specific thing. Well, turns out that one specific thing was like the least impactful part. It was all of these other areas that I didn't think I needed to grow in, which were like the things that were challenging me because other people in that program had different perspectives and different conditionings and different experiences. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never considered that before. Had I not taken that ownership, had I not stepped into that program willing to take on that brutally honest assessment of myself, how would that have impacted my husband? How would that have impacted how I had that conversation with my son the other day? And here's the thing I think a lot of people struggle with, and I personally struggle with this too, is not seeing immediate results from something, right? Like, I took the leadership class, like I should just be a better leader now, right? Like, that's not how it works. It may not have like an overnight effect. It may take years. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because it's like, I'm putting in this work. Why am I not seeing any result? I'm not having any reward. There's no fruits of my labor right now, right? And I even remember back to when I very first started coaching, and I had this one-on-one coaching client. And I remember thinking, like, I wonder if our conversations matter to her as much as they do to me. Like, am I making an impact? Is it doing anything for you? Like, yes, I kind of fished around for some feedback of like, is this helping you? Like, what would you like to see more of? Is there anything that you'd like to see different in our sessions and things like that? And, it was kind of like pulling teeth a little bit. And I think it had a lot to do with just my inexperience as a coach at the time, and maybe not asking really good questions to get to those kinds of answers. But I just remember thinking, like, I wonder if this had an impact. And that's the hard part, is like, sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes we'll never know if the work that we're doing is actually impacting someone or something. But a couple of years later, I think it was about 2 years later, that same client reached out to me out of the blue, and she goes, oh my gosh, I just got to share this update with you. Do you remember when we were talking about yada, yada, yada? Well, this happened. And had we not talked about that, I don't know if I would have reacted the same way or if this thing would have happened to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's been 2 years. I almost like forgot about it, to be honest with you. But 2 years later, the stuff that we had talked about still was in her mind and helped shape who she was and the things that she was experiencing in her life right now. So my point to all of this today, the moral of today's story, is that the way that you show up matters. The type of leader you are does matter. And even like what John Maxwell talks about in his book, The 360 Leader, you can coach up You can coach down, and you can coach laterally to your peers. It doesn't just have to be a leader at the top looking down and coaching these people, to come up with them. There's a 360 rule here. Like you can coach up and down and around and within. There's a lot of the times where I have to coach myself through certain things, and I teach my clients how to coach themselves, right? The goal is not to be dependent on me. The goal is to have had enough experience and having a coach asking you, specific questions and getting into these patterns and routines that are serving you well and that are healthy. So that way it just becomes your natural thing is to ask yourself these questions, which is that brutally honest assessment of saying, is this working? Is this not working? What adjustments need to be made? What am I learning from this moment? How is this impacting my future self? How is this impacting those around me? My kids, my spouse, my team, my community? How is this impacting other people? The way that you lead, the way that you live is leaving a legacy, whether you're intending it to or not. Whether it's a good one or a bad one, the way that you show up today is leaving behind a legacy, whether you realize it or not. This stuff does matter. It does take time. You may not see an immediate shift from it, but it does start with us. And it will become the culture and the new standard if you keep showing up. And again, the way that you show up is the culture. So you better show up wisely. You better show up taking extreme ownership of your actions and your words and being the kind of person that you can be proud of and the kind of person that those around you are looking up to and being influenced by. The way that you show up matters. So that's all I've got for today. Talk to you next time. Thanks for being here today. If this episode resonated with you, make sure that you're following the AgriMinds podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, send this their way. These are the conversations that more people in agriculture need to hear. Talk to you next time.